College football isn't even done yet, and I'm still here bringing you guys draft content. And this is going to be my top 10 running backs in the 2024 NFL draft class. Now, things are going to be subject to change. These are just my rankings as of right now, this moment. I'll still be making a ranking closer towards the draft, but right now these are my rankings. So if you disagree with them, let me know down in the comments. But this is my list, my opinion. And with that being said, let's get into it. All right, coming in at number 10, I do have Marshon Lloyd, the running back from USC. Now he stands at 5'9", 210 pounds, so he's got a really good low center of gravity. And so far in 2023, he's got 108 carries for 803 yards, 9 touchdowns, and a 7.4 average yards per carry. So the production is there. He is playing behind one of the best quarterbacks in college right now, in Caleb Williams. So the production is solid. For some of the pros, I have his burst. The way he hits the holes is incredible. Like, his long speed might not be the best, but his acceleration and his burst through the hole is really good. And as a running back, especially in the NFL, running backs don't get to put their long speed on display much just because NFL defenses are so good. So what really matters more for me is a player's burst and acceleration at the running back position, and Marshon Lloyd has that. And he also has very, very, very good vision. Some of the holes he chooses to hit are pretty insane to me. They're really creative. And moving on to some of his cons, he does have a bit of a fumbling issue, and he's also not the most nuanced route runner as a running back. Like in the NFL, I don't think he's going to be a threat in the receiving game. But if you're a team in day 3 looking for a running back, Marshon Lloyd can definitely be a contributor to a team. All right, coming in at number 9, I do have Raheem Rocket Sanders, and he's taken a bit of a fall on my rankings because I did make a 2024 running back ranking during summer scouting. It was my only position ranking, and I believe I had Raheem at like 3 or 4, so he has taken a bit of a fall, and it's not really his fault. I believe it was week 1 of this season he got injured. I think it was a knee injury, and he hasn't really just played much. He has just now started to come back, so it's not really his fault. We just haven't seen much of him this year, and we've seen a lot of other running backs ahead of him kind of take off and take that next step, and we just haven't seen that from Raheem yet. But getting into it, he's a 6'2", 242 pound running back, so this guy is built like a linebacker but moves like a running back. And like I said, so far in 2023, he's only had 60 carries for 194 yards and 2 touchdowns on a 3.2 average yards per carry. So during the time he has played, he hasn't looked great, but by going off of last season, you can see that Raheem is a monster and is very capable of having a really good season and really good production. Some of the pros I have is that he's solidly built. Obviously, 6'2", 242 as a running back is ungodly. He's also got the size to be a workhorse running back. I just think he has the size to withhold the wear and tear of an NFL season due to that size. And then I also have agility as one of the pros. And when you see that 242 pounds, you don't usually think a guy's going to be agile at that size. But taking into account his size, he is very agile for his size. Like, it kind of looks a little funny just the way he's able to move at that size. So I'm not saying he's as agile as some of the other running backs in this class, but for his size is definitely not a weakness of his. But some of the weaknesses he does have is his long speed isn't amazing, but like I said earlier, long speed is a bit of an overrated category ranking wise for running backs just because they don't really get to put that on display much in the NFL. And then also, I believe he was a former high school receiver, so he does have good hands, but in the NFL, I don't see him being that big of a contributor, at least in the receiving game. But overall, I like Raheem Rocket Sanders, but I kind of would like to see him go back to college just because this running back class isn't as top heavy as last year, but it does have some really good depth down the board. Moving on to number 8, we do have Aundre EST, the running back from Notre Dame. Now, he's 5'11", 227 pounds, but he looks like a lineman out there. This dude is thick. Pause. In 2023, he has 163 carries for 988 yards and 13 touchdowns on a 6.1 yards per carry average. So, solid production, really good touchdown production, and I could really see him being that third and goal back who's going to punch it in the end zone for a team. I don't think he's that dynamic of a running back, but I think he serves a purpose in the NFL as that third down bruiser type of running back. So as some of his pros, I do have his size, obviously. And also, he's got really good contact balance too. He doesn't really go down on first contact much at all. And some of the cons I have is his speed, and his burst isn't that good. He is toting around a lot of weight, and he's not as agile as like a guy like Rocket Sanders we were just talking about. So I think he's going to struggle to be a dynamic running back in the NFL, but I already know a team's going to fall in love with him for being that bruiser type of running back. So I could see him being another day 3 running back who a team has a specific fit for on the team, but I don't see him being much of a dynamic player or being a number 1 running back on a team in the future. Coming in at number 7 is one of my favorite running backs in the class in Ray Davis. He's a running back out of Kentucky, and he's 5'10", 216 pounds, but he's like a little bowling ball out there. So far in 2023, he's got 160 carries for 929 yards, 11 touchdowns, and a 5.8 average yards per carry. And if you don't know who Ray Davis is, turn on the game against Florida. He absolutely dominated Florida's defense. Now, he also struggled pretty badly against Alabama's defense just last week. Now, obviously, Kentucky's offensive line isn't going to be able to do much against Alabama's defensive line, so there weren't many running lanes for Ray Davis to run through during that game, but he did end up with 2 touchdowns. But really, his yards after contact is really good. Like, he does not go down during first contact. His lower center of gravity makes it so he's very, very balanced as a runner, and his vision's really good as well. Like, he picks and chooses his holes quickly but decisively at the same time. Some of the cons I do have, though, is his age. I believe he is a redshirt senior, if I'm not mistaken. So he's going to come into the league at like a 23 years old, which most teams nowadays, if they're not 21 coming straight out of college, they want nothing to do with them just because a running back's lifespan isn't that long. So they really want to get the guy that's younger with the potential and they can kind of have for a longer period of time, because as we know nowadays, it's really hard to get that second contract as a running back, and it's going to be even harder for running backs like Ray Davis who come into the league a bit later and a little bit older. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes in the draft. I could see him going undrafted even, but he's just a really, really big favorite of mine. And I also forgot to mention his long speed. His long speed is not great, but I'm not too worried about that. My main concern with him is that teams are going to not even bat an eye with him because of his age, but I really do think Ray Davis could be a difference maker for a team. Moving on to number 6, I do have Braylon Allen, the running back from Wisconsin. Now, this is another guy similar to Rocket Sanders, who's massive, built like a linebacker for a running back. He stands at 6'2", 245 pounds, and so far in 2023, he has 133 carries for 757 yards, 8 touchdowns, and a 5.7 average yards per carry, which isn't bad at all. For his pros, I have his size, obviously. I also have his power. He really utilizes that 245-pound frame, and I also could see him being another workhorse running back in the NFL. Last year, at least, Wisconsin definitely used him as that workhorse running back. He was getting tons of touches. Now, kind of like Aundre EST, I don't see him being the most dynamic running back. Like, he has a little bit of wiggle to him, but it's nothing crazy. Like, he definitely sacrifices some speed and elusiveness for being more powerful with the weight. So it's kind of a give or take with him. I prefer my running backs to be a little bit more dynamic and have a little bit more wiggle to him. So that's why I do have him at number 6. And also, I don't see him being much of a threat in the receiving game in the NFL either. But I could see a team like the Titans drafting him in that second, third round maybe to be that Derrick Henry replacement and to, be in that backfield with Tajay Spears. I think that would be a really good running back backfield once Derrick Henry inevitably falls off a bit. So I could see him going a bit earlier in the draft than some of the other guys we've talked about. Also, he's very young. He might even be 20 years old when he plays his first NFL game. Like, this guy is insanely young. So I could also see him going back to college for another year. But either way, I think he's a really solid option for a team like the Titans or a team that's looking for that bruiser running back. Moving on to number 5, I have Bucky Irving, another favorite of mine. I really like Bucky Irving, and I believe in my last running back rankings I had him at like 7, and now he's at 5, so he's moving up my board slowly but surely. By the end of the draft season, I could see him being my 3rd, maybe even 2nd running back, especially with some of the injuries towards the people in the top of my list. We'll get to them when we get to them. Bucky Irving's a running back from Oregon. He's 5'10", 194 pounds, so he's definitely on the slighter side, but so far in 2023, he's been really productive with 138 carries, 939 yards, 10 touchdowns, and a 6.8 average yards per carry. So the production's there with Bucky Irving. He's on one of the better teams in college football, and For his pros, I have his elusiveness and burst. Dude is very shifty. He can make a guy miss. He can make a guy look stupid even. Like, he can make you miss in a phone booth, or however this thing goes. He can win a game of tag in a phone booth. Something like that. Either way, the guy can make you look silly. He's a really good receiving option too. For a team, I could see him being a bit of a scat back running back, one of the better scat back running backs in the NFL. For some of his cons though, I have his patience. I feel like he tries to bounce runs to the outside a bit too often for my liking. I really want to see him be able to run in between the tackles if he's going to be that number one option for a team at the running back position. His balance isn't great. Like, due to his size, he can go down on first contact somewhat often, and that's mainly due to his size, which is another con. I really want to see him get to that 200-pound mark, which I think he will by, the draft combine and when the draft process starts. But as of right now, he's below that 200-pound mark, which I'm not a fan of. But overall, I really like Bucky Irving. I could see him being a high riser if he has a good draft process. And I could see a team taking him early day 2 in the second or third round. Coming in at number 4, I do have Jonathan Brooks, the running back from Texas. And unfortunately, he did just tear his ACL in last week's game. And that's a big blow for him. And he's at number 4 now. But if he did not tear his ACL, he would be in contention for the number 1 spot. I believe I did have him at my number 1 spot. But with the injury, who knows if he even comes out this season. He might return to Texas. But then again, they do have that Baxter kid who's the true freshman now. So I really don't know what's going to happen with Jonathan Brooks, but he is eligible. He might come out, so I'm going to rank him. He's 6 foot, 207 pounds, and in 2023, he was off to a blazing season. He had 187 carries for 1,139 yards, 10 touchdowns, and a 6.1 average yards per carry. The dude was lighting college football up. He's a really good receiver for the running back position. He's got great burst. He hits through the hole with amazing burst, and his yards after contact is also really good. Like, he can absorb the hit and stay on balance and keep just churning the legs, something that I really like to see. Some of the cons, I have his injury, obviously. We don't know how he's going to return from injury. Some running backs really struggle to come back from a torn ACL. A guy like Saquon Barkley struggled pretty badly, but then a guy like Breece Hall kind of bounced back this next season. So it really just depends. So it's going to be a big question on if he's the same Jonathan Brooks post-injury. And I also don't think his agility is amazing. Like, I wanted to find another con, and I guess that's the only thing I could really find, is he's not the most shiftiest running back in the world, but I mean, really, I'm nitpicking at that point. Jonathan Brooks is a really solid all-around back, and it's going to be interesting to see if he comes out. If he does come out, I think he might fall in the draft a bit, but before the injury, I could have seen him maybe even sneaking into the first round. I don't really think there's a first-round running back this year, but it seems like there always is, and I could definitely see Jonathan Brooks being that if he didn't tear his ACL. Moving on to number 3 is my guy, Trayon Henderson, the running back from Ohio State. This was my number 1 running back coming into the college football season, and so he slipped a bit, and I'll get into the reasons why. He's a 5'10", 214-pound back, and in 2023, he's got 103 carries for 648 yards, 8 touchdowns, and a 6.3 average yards per carry. Now, the reason he's fell a bit is because he's been dealing with injuries yet again this season. He's dealt with injuries the past 2 seasons. He's having a bit of a better season than he did last season when he was playing through that foot injury, but man, that freshman season he had was just amazing. He was Saquon Barkley-esque even. That's what I like to think of him as. And his sophomore season, which was last season, he was dealing with a foot injury, which kind of made it so he didn't have the best season. A lot of people were really down on him last season coming into this season, but he's bounced back from when he's played. Like I said, he's been battling injury this season as well. But when he's on the field this season, he's looking like one of the best running backs in the class and in college football. He's a big play threat, just like Saquon Barkley a bit. He likes to bounce things to the outside, and he has the agility, speed, shiftiness, everything to do so. So I don't mind it. I would like to see his vision get a little bit better. Like, I do see him hesitate a bit to, really hit the holes, at least in between the tackles. So he might have that little bit of that Saquon Barkley feel where he does a little bit too much dancing in the backfield instead of just taking what the offensive line is giving him. So I do think he might be a little too hesitant there, but if you want a running back with big play potential, this is your guy. And man, come the draft, he might be my number 1 running back. I'm really in love with Trayon Henderson. But for now, I do have him at my number 3 spot. Coming in at number 2, I have Trey Benson. it was a toss-up between him and my number one running back. I ultimately chose to put Trey Benson on number 2, but I could very easily see him being a number 1 running back for someone else. Like, he's really got no holes in his game. He's the running back from Florida State. He stands at 6'1", 223 pounds, so really good size. And so far in 2023, he has 113 carries for 721 yards, 10 touchdowns, and has a 6.4 average yards per carry. Now, this is one of the most complete running backs in the class. I mean, he's solidly built. He's got great contact balance, great power. He's got a great forced missed tackle rate, especially last season. It was at an incredible rate. You know, his long speed's there. I wouldn't say it's his best attribute, but it's definitely not a weakness. Like, he really just has it all. The one thing that I do see him struggle with is in the receiving game. I don't think he's really a premier receiver. He runs the basic running back route tree, nothing crazy, and I also don't think he's that much of a blocker. But if those are your two nitpicks, like, so be it. This dude is an all-around great player. He's having a really good season for Florida State, and I could see a team like the Ravens taking him in the second round, and that would be a scary sight to see him and Lamar Jackson in that backfield. Man, that would be great. That's kind of like my dream fit for him is the Baltimore Ravens, but I could see him maybe sneaking into the first round. But like I said, I like all these running backs early day 2. Trey Benson I could see going early day 2, and I wouldn't bat an eye about it. And at my number 1 spot, I decided to put Blake Corm here. He's a running back out of Michigan. He's 5'8", 213 pounds, so he's got a really low center of gravity, and you probably know Blake Corm by now. He almost came out in last year's draft class. I thought he was. He decided to come back to Michigan, and so far in 2023, he's having a bit of a down year, at least yards wise. He got 152 carries on 794 yards, 18 touchdowns, and a 5.2 average yards per carry. So the yards, a bit down from last season, but the touchdowns are ungodly. 18 touchdowns so far is amazing. There's still like 2 or 3 games left. So he could definitely hit that 20 touchdown mark pretty easily. Like I said, he's a really solidly built running back. He's got really good vision and patience, and his production, especially touchdown production this season, but production in general has been really good for Blake Corm. Some of his cons though is his height. At 5'8", you worry about his height. He might not even be 5'8" too. He looks like he might be 5'7.5". I think 5'8" is a bit generous. I also have tread. He has a lot of tread on his tires, kind of like a Ray Davis. With him coming back to college, it might hurt his draft stock a bit because, like I said, NFL teams want that 21-year-old with fresh legs and great potential. Blake Corm, especially last season, he had like probably close to 200 and something carries. Hold on, let me check what it was. Yeah, he had 247 carries last season, so he's got a ton of tread on his tires, which NFL teams do not like. And he's also going to be coming in at like a 22, 23 years old, so NFL teams aren't going to like that part, but other than that, he's a really solid all-around running back with great, like I said, great production, great vision, great burst. I think he's the safest bet at the running back position this year. I think he's going to be productive no matter the team that drafts him. But I'm not sure if he's going to be able to be that number 1 running back like I'm confident like a guy like Trey Benson could be. But yeah, that's my list. I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to have questions about where is this running back? Where's that running back? So if you leave it down in the comments, I'll let you know where I have them or if I've even done a deep dive onto them. It's impossible to have a quote-unquote perfect list. There's going to be people that disagree with every single ranking. Like, this is just my ranking, my opinion. And if you like the content, I mean, consider giving it a like. Consider subscribing. I'm going to be making rankings like this for every position. And with that being said, I'm the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.